Boom, bam, bop, bada bop, boom, pow.
Now that's a lot of damage!
Hey guys, so there's this new PvP Necro build that's been running around utilizing Bloodwave, and it does damage, I mean big damage. It's probably the highest DPS build for Necros right now. And for my version of the build, to be honest, this build is kind of a Frankenstein of my old Infamous and Sever builds combined with the Bloodwave. And so this build has 3 sources of damage. Since we're giving up Bone Storm and Shielding Storm, we're going to be a lot squishier, so I thought we might as well just pump in as much damage as possible. I have a lot more thoughts on this build, but I'm sure you guys are tired of me rambling on, so let's just go and rapid fire through this guide. Okay, so let's take a look at the skill tree. We're going to be taking Reap for Corpse Generation, 5 points into Sever for our core skill, Hued Flesh is important as always, and of course Blood Mist for PvP. We're taking another 5 points into Corpse Explosion, and into Blighted Corpse Explosion to make it into a Darkness skill, 1 point into Spiked Armor just so we can get a little bit of Thorns to proc some lucky hits. We're taking 1 point into Grim Harvest so we can fill the rest of Fueled by Death. We are taking Decrepify into Abhorrent Decrepify, but we're not putting this on our hotbar. Since we're on seasonal servers, we're going to be using our Decrep Aura Heart. Amplify damage is great for a bit more damage. Death's Embrace is the same, along with some mitigation as well. We will be taking Corpse Tendrils into Play Corpse Tendrils. And for this Shadow Tree, we are taking 1 point into Reaper's Pursuit, 3 points into Gloom, and 3 points into Crippling Darkness. Unfortunately, Terra only gets 1 point. We're just pretty low on skill points for the build since we're focusing on Corpse Explosion and Sever, so we will be losing some damage there. And of course, for our ultimate, we're taking Blood Wave, and it's important to fully upgrade it so we can get the 3 blood orbs it leaves behind. Since we're sacrificing all our minions, Stand Alone and Memento Mori as always, and it is a darkness build, so we are taking Shadow Blight. I've tested a lot of variations with the build replacing Sever. I've tried both Blight and Bone Prison with the Blight Spawn and Iron Maiden, all as 3 different options to replace Sever. And I do think they're all viable and have their pros and cons. But for my personal taste, I decided to stick with Sever. Just because for me, Blight feels clunky to use and Bone Prison's cooldown is a bit too long. And for Iron Maiden, it just didn't feel proactive enough. Alright, and now time for the gear. I just want to preface this by saying my gear is actually pretty badly optimized. Mainly having the wrong stat affixes on my gear or just really low rolls. However, I'm still seeing pretty good results, so that means you guys should see even better results than me. So I'm not going to explain every stat, but I'll give you the quick and dirty. For the helm, we are using the Exploiters aspect. More crowd control, more damage, try to get max life, and I would say cooldown reduction on the helm is a must. For the chest piece, I am using the Protecting aspect or the Bubble aspect. We're really squishing this build, so a little bit of immunity goes a long way. Try to get max life and other defensive stats here. For my gloves, I have Explosive Mist. I think I do have a really good pair of gloves here. You want Sever ranks, lucky hit, crit chance, and attack speed. For the pants, I have the Embalmer aspect. We want as many blood orbs as possible, and it'll make sense when we get to our rings. On the pants, I would say Blood Mist is a must, and I highly recommend Corpse Explosion and Max Life. I am using Ghost Walkers on my boots. Since we're really squishy on this build, I want as much movement speed as possible to create distance while our Blood Mist is on cooldown. Try grabbing as much movement speed here as possible along with other defensive stats. For our amulet, we are running Blighted for that 50% bonus. It gives a lot of multiplicative damage. And I would say movement speed and cooldown reduction is a must on the amulet. Ranks to Corpse skills is great, and I wish I had essence cost reduction here, but this is so far the best amulet I have. And for this ring, I am using the Fast Blood aspect. And this is why we want as many blood orbs as possible so we can get our blood wave off cooldown. For the must take stats, I would say you want to grab Vulnerable and Max Life. And for our second ring, we are running the Tidal aspect. A big portion of our damage is blood wave, so additional blood waves are going to help here. And for the wand, this is where I'm running the ultimate Shadow aspect. And this is what truly makes our blood wave do insane amounts of damage. And finally for the offhand, we are running a Focus again. I'm starting to really like Focus for the inherent cooldown, and rolling another affix of cooldown here is going to be really great for lowering your cooldowns as much as possible. And of course we're running Blood Soaked on our Focus. And that's mainly so our movement speed is no longer reduced. And crit chance is also nice here, just so we can get a little bit more damage with our Sever. And for the hearts, we are using the Decrept Aura Heart so we can get access to Decrepify without putting it on our hotbar. The Sacrilegious Heart is also great to help us activate more Corpse Tendrils and Corpse Explosions. And for the Wrathful Heart, we are using the Creeping Death Heart. And even though it does say monsters and bosses, it does work on players. For our Book of the Dead, we are sacrificing our Reapers, and then for Skeletal Mages, we are sacrificing our Cold Mages. And for the Golem, it is going to be the Blood Golem being sacrificed just so we can get a bit more maximum life. I have tried sacrificing the Bone Golem just for that attack speed and to make our Sever feel a little bit more fluid, but I opted to go for Blood just to get a bit more health. And now let's go over the Paragon tree. And for our first glyph, I'm actually still running Sacrificial. I think Blood Drinker is a good option, but when it comes to this build, I often err on the side of offense over defense. Since this build is already focused on damage and we're so squishy, I thought it'd be better just to focus on our strengths. And so that's why I decided to stick with Sacrificial instead. For the next board, we are grabbing the Wither board, and here I am slotting in our Control glyph. We still have a decent amount of CC here, so the Control glyph won't be wasted, but if you do want something more defensive, I'd recommend the Territorial glyph. And for the next board, we are taking Scent of Death on the left over here, where we are slotting in our Darkness glyph. I do want to mention that the pathing over here to our Legendary node can be switched. I opted to go for the Northern path here so that I can take a bit more max life, but you can go under for the critical strike damage instead, since we are making use of it with our Sever. And because of Sever, we are also taking the critical strike nodes over here. Going back up here, we are taking Flesh Eater and slotting in our Exploit glyph. Again, there's some critical strike nodes here, so I will be taking that as well. And finally, for our last board, we are using the Blood Begets Blood board, and that's where we will be placing our Scourge glyph because there's a lot of willpower on this board. So I have to admit, I was quite frustrated with this build in the beginning. Since we're taking Blood Wave instead of Bone Storm for our ultimate, that means we couldn't use the Shielding Storm aspect along with the inherent damage reduction Bone Storm provided, which meant you are really squishy with this build, and I was definitely dying a lot in the beginning. However, the extreme damage output of this build is really strong, and I think this build probably stands the best chance of beating higher geared players. It's just that if you make a mistake, you'll be destroyed quite quickly. And so I'll probably be playing around with this build for a little bit longer. So if I do have any updates, I will keep you updated in my build guide, which I will leave down in the description below. So if you want a more detailed look, you can check that out there. If you enjoyed the guide, then consider subscribing. Otherwise, thanks for checking this out, and hopefully I'll see you in another video.